Welcome back to Joe Stunner Boxing. Okay, you will have heard, no doubt, perhaps you haven't, but I think most of you probably have, about the death of John Cooney, who passed away earlier this week following a brain bleed. And this was for a Celtic belt. A tragedy, terrible tragedy. I did a video about it. Go and have a look if you're interested. But some people pay the ultimate price and some people really dodge a bullet. And one person who has really, really dodged a bullet is Shavkatdzhon Rakhimov, who suffered a brain bleed following a knockout. I think it was 7 rounds to a guy called Justin Pauldo, an American, 30-year-old American who came in with an 18 wins, 2 defeats record and managed to get Rakhimov out of there. And it was a straight right that put Rakhimov over by the ropes. He collapsed. I think it was 8 rounds. Was it 7 or 8? I can't remember. Anyway, well, it was 7 or 8 rounds. It was roughly that part of the fight. Might have been 8 rounds, but yeah, he basically flattened the guy, and then Rakhimov was clearly distressed whilst in the ring, was stretching out of it, went to the hospital, had a brain bleed. No, I don't think he had any surgery. I haven't read anything about surgery, but he was apparently released from hospital. You don't always have to have surgery if you've got a brain bleed. I think Marco Antonio Barrera, I think earlier on in his career, had some sort of, was it a motorcycle accident? Or some sort of accident where he had a slight bleed on the brain, and of course he went on to have a successful career. Edwin Valero, he definitely had a motorcycle accident where I think he had a plate in his head or something, and so did Barrera. They had very similar injuries. But he was allowed to fight. He wasn't allowed to fight initially in America. He had to fight abroad for quite a while, and then he eventually went to America. Valero is a rather tragic and murderous character. Committed suicide, of course, after murdering his wife. But a lot of people say that the fact that Valero ended up in that condition, where he was so violent outside of the ring, not just in it, is because if you do suffer some sort of neurological injury, it can change your character. You can have just a terrible temper, or you can become happy one second, depressed the next, be in tears one minute, be elated the next, not thinking rationally, all this sort of stuff. Well, fortunately for Rakhimov, he managed to avoid paying the ultimate price. And looking at his record, his fight prior to this was in 2024, early 2024. It must have been about a year ago. He fought Eduardo Nunes, who knocked him out in the 11th round of an IBF title eliminator. And that was a grueling, tough fight. I think Rakhimov was fighting in his home country, probably I think it was for the first time. But the Mexican guy, Sugar Nunes, he calls himself. By the way, Tajikistan is Rakhimov's home country. The Mexican got the job done, knocked him out in the 11th round. Now, prior to that, Rakhimov lost a tough split decision over in Cardiff to Joe Cordina, who of course is Welsh, and that was a really tough fight. He lost a split decision, and he was actually the IBF champion. He won the vacant belt against Zelfa Barrett, of all people. And in fact, he was on the floor against Barrett, and that wasn't an easy gig either. He knocked Barrett out in the 9th round, but he was on the floor and he took some punishment in that fight. And then when he fought Cordina, it really was a tough fight. and there was accident headbutt. It was cut over his right eye, I think halfway through the fight. He was also on the floor, I think, in the second round. But here's the thing. At the end of the fight, he was so exhausted. I mean, it was quite shocking to watch. He just couldn't, or he almost couldn't catch his breath. And he was hanging on the ropes, sort of, absolutely, like he just did not have a single, drop of energy left. So when you piece all this stuff together, I mean, he also had a majority draw against Jojo Diaz. That was back in 2021 when Jojo Diaz was still, a threat. Still had something left. When you add all this together, especially the 3 consecutive defeats, it's not that surprising that he ended up having this brain bleed. Now, I would assume that his career is over. It should be over, because he is dicing with death or very, very serious injury if he was to continue. Because his defeats haven't just been, quick and clinical. They've been slow, grueling fights. And some of his, like I say, some of his wins have been slow and grueling. And the draw with Jojo Diaz was another tough one. The guy's 30 years of age. It's really time for him to call it a day now, I think. And I hope he does, because bearing in mind what happened to Cooney, plus the fact we've been hearing a lot about Derek Chisora. I mean, did you see the state of Derek Chisora's face at the end of that Wallin fight? And Otto Wallin was insipid. His performance was absolutely asinine. But he still managed to put enough gloves on slower than a mudslide Derek and swell his face up. But Derek, of course, just trundles forward, creaking forward, throwing huge hooks. He only knows one way to fight, and that's going forward. And it was on TalkSport. They were talking to Dillian White, and Dillian said, I want Derek to retire because he's taking too much punishment. Which he is. He's saying Derek has to dig really, really deeply to win these fights, and he's taking too much out of him. Yes, Dillian, that's true, but you know what, mate? I'd say the same about you. I'd say your punch resistance is shot to bits, and perhaps you should consider retiring. Now, I don't normally like saying that a fighter should retire, because I don't have their medical reports. I don't know. They may have passed all sorts of, CAT scans or whatever the modern equivalent is. And they may be neurologically, if you look at the scans, they may be fine. I don't know. I honestly don't know. But you've got to wonder, when people are taking this amount of punishment, especially when they've had, as is the case with Rakhimov, 3 very, very tough losses on the bounce, 2 of them by knockout. It's not good, is it? It's not good. And when you consider the fate of people like John Cooney, maybe it is best to err on the side of caution, because Rakhimov, as an example, it wasn't as if he was undefeated and he'd been winning all his fights easy and then suddenly he gets badly injured. There was a build-up to this accident, and he is very, very lucky to still be here. So, I don't know. Yeah, you tell me what you think. Give me your opinions below. Yeah, and I'll read them and answer as many as I can. Anyway, look, thanks a lot for listening. Subscribe to the channel if you're new, and hit the like button. If you could do that, you'd be helping us out a lot. And yeah, thank you very much. I will read your comments. Meanwhile, bye for now. Enjoy the rest of your day.